Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bikini and the Brain. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Ashley Kaltwasser.
Hi.
And I'm Adam from TeamElitePhysique.com.
Ooh.
And we have a good topic for you today, which is basically about being realistic, right?
Yeah, being realistic and managing like your expectations when it comes to progress and the fitness journey in general.
Yeah. And I think that this is a really good topic specifically because it goes into what you can expect in a year, what you can expect as a beginner, what you can expect as an advanced athlete. How long does it actually take to build, the type of physique for whatever division? We'll go into a couple divisions. And like, what's that realistic time frame? Because it's a common question that I get, common question that you get. Sometimes we'll run into clients that want to go a little faster, and we're like, hey, this is going to take a while. So I think everyone to hear this part is really good so you can manage your own expectations. And not just that, but set yourself up for, okay, I should be here by then type of thing. Maybe I'm not working right if I'm not here by then type of thing. So really good one. I'm glad that this is a good topic. So
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, getting into progress, I think it's important to analyze what is this person's goal, right? Are they just kind of wanting to get into fitness just to compete once and just to say they did it for fun, bucket list kind of thing? Or is somebody getting into this to, get a pro card or win a show, or make this like their career? Who knows? So I think before you even begin to kind of analyze that, I think that's one of the most important questions is what is your goal with the sport?
Yeah. And that's going to make a huge factor in how long it's going to take you to get to your goal, or how long, when you're going to get on stage, really. And I tell people, okay, because I'll get this question a lot too. When people are like, I want to compete. And I'm like, okay, do you want to compete and win the whole show, or do you just want to compete and hopefully squeeze out a top 5? Does it not matter that much? Or do you want to go there and just destroy the show? And there's a huge difference. And I think a lot of times people think they can go and destroy the show in the same period of time of when they can compete. And those are totally two different things. So I have a few people that are like that, that are like, they want to compete. And I'm like, go for it. If you're a transformation client and you want to get on stage the first time, nothing wrong with that. I support it 100%. I love seeing someone who loses 50 pounds get on stage. But understand, you're at the transformation to the stage. And then there's a difference of someone who's at the competed and at the going from competition to the pro journey stage. You're not, when you're in that transformation stage, you are on that pro journey, but there's stages in before that you're going to have to go through. So are you going to transform and be a pro looking the first time? Very rarely. I would say if you're going to be someone who's losing, 40, 50 pounds, you're probably going to go to the transformation to just get on stage, then go from stage to improvement to the next stage, then go from looking better that stage to winning the overall type of thing, and then winning the overall to nationals, and then not placing at nationals to placing at nationals to the next year being competitive at nationals, and then getting your pro card type of thing. That's the usual journey. It's pretty rare someone who's going to go from just transforming to pro that year. It's just not super realistic. And if it was that realistic, everyone would be pro. You got to understand it is pro. It's hard to become a pro in the NPC, So, the problem too is a lot of times is people will see people who turn to pro their first show at a natural organization like an INBF or WNBF or something like that, and you got to there's a different level. There's a huge different level between that and an OCB. It's just a different level. I've seen a lot of people who kind of transform, get on one of those stages, and they give out pro cards right at the local shows. Even if there's only 20 people who show up, and then they're like, oh, I'm a pro. And then you see that and you're like, oh, she did it. I'm like, well, she didn't do it in the IFBB. There's a big difference. This is like the MLB of baseball, the NBA of basketball, the NFL football. It's the best league there is. There's only one Miss Olympia, Mr. Olympia, and it is the only one way to get there, and that is the NPC IFBB. It's the big pond. It's not being a big fish in a small pond. It's the big pond. So we do have to set that aside too. And I think one day I'm going to do a video on the different organizations, because they do have their purpose, for different things. But if you're trying to be the best in the world, there's only one person who's going to get recognized as that, and that's always going to be the Miss Olympia of whatever division it is, the Mr. Olympia of whatever division it is. So, and that's just the reality of things, you know?
Right.
You know, when you recognize the best in the world, who is it? The Stanley Cup champions. It's not the Eastern Hockey League, you know, or European Hockey League. It's not, they don't not recognize as the best in the world.
True.
It's just the way it is. So, now that being said, when we talk about someone going from, well, I guess what would be your experience when someone's going from a transformation stage to a stage? Like, what are the things, the hurdles that you run into with people and their thought process on it?
Well, I think there's a few different types of transformation people to begin with. There's people that maybe they're overweight, they have excess body fat, but they have an athletic background. They have good muscle underneath there. Of course, you're not really going to be able to see it quite yet, but they have experience with weights. Maybe they were weightlifters in the past. And then you also have some transformation people that they appear to be fit people by normal people standards, right? They might do yoga twice a week and do a spin class or something, but they don't have the muscle necessary for a competition, right? They might just kind of be lean, maybe fit people, but don't necessarily have that muscle. So we're kind of looking at the two different sides of the spectrum, right? But also another factor to consider is we don't know this person's genetics, right? We don't know how fast they can build muscle or how fast they can lose weight.
Yeah.
So that in itself is a little bit of a learning curve. And I think that if you're not familiar with that aspect of it, you need to allow yourself extra time to figure out your body a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like, how fast am I losing weight? Or, wow, I'm able to kind of put on muscle pretty quickly, or whatever the case may be. I think that's something that people don't realize. So, you know, there's two different sides of it, and I think everyone's different. Everyone's journey is going to be different. But I think, you know, a lot of people see online that so-and-so did a 12-week prep, or so-and-so did a 16-week prep, right? And like you mentioned, it's very rare for somebody to kind of go from, like, not in the competing physique shape or being familiar with it to getting a pro card right away. It does happen sometimes, but oftentimes not. I think from my experience, when I did my first show, it actually took me 8 weeks from not training as a bikini athlete to stepping on stage. But here's why. I was a track athlete. It basically went from track to competing, right? So I had that base. I was already quite lean. I just kind of needed to diet more and train a little bit more. But even then, let's be honest, back in the day, it wasn't as competitive as it is now, right? Yeah. So it didn't take that much for me to get stage ready because the standards were different back in the day. So, you know, that's just like an example of like, hey, I had a good base to start with. I had some muscle, I could use more, but it wasn't like I was starting from scratch, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a huge factor in it too. Actually, it's funny, is I had another girl the other day, it was Courtney's client, and she was like, I think she could be ready in like 6 weeks, and she had no intentions of competing or anything like that. And then Courtney sent me her pictures, and she was like, do you think she can be ready in 6 weeks? Am I crazy? And I was like, who is this girl? Like, how does she look this good when she's not even in the intentions of competing and looks like better than like almost everyone who's competing? Right. And so she'll know who I am. What she knows who she is when she hears this. Because I was like, what's going on? Why do you look so good? Like, it's crazy. No intentions of competing. And, you know, sometimes they just have it. You know, they just have the structure. They got the juice, you know? Did
they have a sport background or something?
You know what? She did have a sports background. I think it was actually, if I remember correct, I think it was gymnastics. Okay. You know, or it's always one of the two, gymnastics or track. It's like those two, for some reason, develop girls in a way where it's always easier. I don't know if it's just the explosive muscle fibers you need for that stuff, and it kind of develops that base. But whenever we have someone who's like an easy transformation, it's pretty rare that they don't do something, you know, that they didn't do something. But, you know, you have one-offs too, like Anya, who just, you know, she did horse riding.
She's got great genetics, man.
That's a perfect example too of someone within their first year going pro from, you know, she was lifting, but it wasn't anything serious. She'd be like
normal people lifting.
Yeah, and then you give her a program for 6 months and she looks like a pro. Right. And then within a year, I think it took 1.5 years total from her to like be serious to like stand out, you know, pro. Like it's.
How long did it take from her starting her prep to her first bikini competition? Do you know?
It was like 6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Yeah.
So even then, even with somebody with great genetics.
It was November to June, so 7 months. Yeah, something like that. And then, and even then, she was just developing at a very fast rate. You could be like, okay, every show was like better and better, So, it's not as fast as people think it is. I think it's what it comes down to. And it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be good at any sport you just started doing 12 weeks in. You know what I mean? It's kind of ridiculous to even think about that. You know what I mean? Like, what if I were to say, let's say I was tall enough and big enough to play basketball, right? I guess I'd be big enough, but not tall enough. So what if I was like, hey, Ashley, you're my coach, you're my basketball coach, and I want to go pro, NBA, and I want to start, I think 16 weeks would be a good chance for me to like play at a regular league, and then like 6 months would be good for me to try out for the NBA. What do you think? Right? Would you slap me and be like, guy, you're being ridiculous right now. Unless you were playing since you were 8, like, why are you even talking about it? So it's like, but for some reason in bodybuilding, pro bikini, we're like, oh no, we could do it. 6 months, I want to go in for my pro card. I'm like, it's not supposed to be that easy.
Right,
like,
true.
It's not supposed to be that easy. So
I think like, obviously within a span of 6 months, most people, unless they were very overweight, probably could get lean enough, right, to be on stage, but are they going to look good? Probably not, You got to build that muscle, and also, if you do lose weight or fat too quickly, you're also sacrificing some muscle too.
Yeah.
So it's a process, and I think at the end of the day, the more you can kind of build that muscle up underneath, is best if you've never competed, right? I think it's important to have that base in there, so that when you do start dieting, you're not going to lose all that muscle, so.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. And actually I want to go into that because people don't think about that. They just think, here's the problem you have especially with Americans in general. They think they can lose weight way faster than they should lose weight.
Because the Biggest Loser, you look on the TV and they're losing like 15 pounds a week.
Yeah, you have that. You have all these celebrities. You have Weight Watchers and things like that. You guys need to understand the difference of losing weight and losing fat. There's a huge difference, and then people don't really separate those two. And it's just how it's marketed. Lose 7 pounds in 7 days and that type of thing. Well, if you look at like the history of dieting, and you look at like the research on dieting and how people can maintain their results, it's very, very low. Like if you look at the long-term success rate of dieting, it's a pretty upside down scale. Like it's working against you for sure. Like long-term success. And the reason is that people diet way too hard, and then they lose. Here's what happens. So let's give you some breakdown. Every pound of lean body mass you have can burn anywhere between like 6 and 24 calories per day. And that's obviously depending on how much movement you do and all these different things. So there's a huge varying factor on that. If you're running marathons every day, well then you're gonna be probably closer to like 25 pounds. If you're sitting at home all day, you're probably gonna be closer to 6 calories per pound, right? Type of thing, maybe even less. So huge range there, right? So what happens when you just go on a diet, like a Weight Watchers diet or something like that, that's like more aggressive? Well, and not all Weight Watchers diets are aggressive. That's just like, let's say you went extreme, Biggest Loser diet, let's say. So let's say you went and you lost 15 pounds a week. Well, 15 pounds of fat, if you were to do the math on that, would be 47,500 calories, if my math is right in my head. So that means you'd be burning 47,500 calories from fat per day, past how many calories it takes you to live, right? How many calories so let's say you're eating 2,000 calories. You'd have to do, so if 2,000 calories, that'd be 14,000 calories. So that means you'd need to be in the craziest deficit, a 47,500 calorie deficit past 14,000. So like that's just so much energy used. There's no way you can use that much fat in a week. It's just not possible. So, and people do it all the time. I've seen 20 pounders in a week on Biggest Loser, right? Mm-hmm. So what are they losing, right? Well, one, you're losing some water, right? You are definitely losing some skeletal muscle, lean mass. There's actually, there's a lot of things that are lean mass. Everything that's not fat is lean mass, basically. So you're losing some skeletal muscle, you're losing some lean mass water, you're losing body fat, of course. So what does that do at the end? Well, let's say someone lost 15 pounds. Let's say they had a crazy week and they lost 4 pounds of fat, which is pretty incredible. That's like probably, I don't know what the possibilities for someone that big. 14,000 calories of used from energy, from fat a week. I mean, it sounds a little bit more realistic. That's still pushing it. So let's say they do that. Well, the rest of that could be, let's say, lean mass. Well, what happens at the end when that person's not doing hours and hours of cardio? They're not eating, they're eating actual regularly, not even eating a lot, but eating regularly. Well, now they have less lean mass, less metabolic tissue available. And because they have less metabolic tissue, they have way lower metabolic output. So we're not talking about damaged metabolisms or anything like that. We're just talking about less metabolically active tissue. So when that person starts eating again, they gain weight back at a way faster rate because their metabolism is now slower than what it was when they started. Okay, and we're talking about that in terms of, again, metabolically active tissue, not huge hormonal adaptations causing this like metabolic damage that people want to say, right? So will they have some of that? Yeah, probably some lower testosterone, lower estrogen levels, lower T3, T4, thyroid hormone conversion, things like that. That happens too with extreme diet. So now they're set up in this way where they're going to gain back that weight really, really fast. And the same thing happens with bodybuilding too. Like if you're a female and you're losing like more than, let's say a wellness athlete who's like, 100 and some of these wellness girls are like 160 to 180 these days. They're getting pretty muscular. Like that's like 2 to 2.5 pounds. You're probably losing some lean mass. If you're a bikini competitor who competes at like 120 on stage, like 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds is kind of what you're shooting for. Or else you're probably losing some lean mass. I mean, you're probably sacrificing at that point. I say as a rule of thumb, I keep it at like 2 pounds a week. So
is that a max?
I mean, it depends on the person. If it's a 5 foot flat, 4'11", bikini competitor, I'm going to say max for her is like 1.5, because she's so little, I try to max it out at like 1%. So if you weigh 140, right, you're going to be 1.4. That's what I say. 1.4, let's try to keep it at 1% max per week. I know with that weight, we can maintain most, if not all, your lean body mass, all your at least skeletal muscle mass, right? Not water's always going to go. So if you're measuring yourself on like an in-body scale or a DEXA scan and you're losing lean mass while you're losing fat, understand that fat is actually, its name is hydrated adipose tissue, so it's hydrated. So when you lose water weight from losing fat, that's why, because you're losing fat and that's hydrated, so you're losing water, so you're losing more lean body mass. So don't freak out when you lose a little bit of lean body mass, because there's no way to avoid losing that lean mass, which is water. So people don't understand that either. They'll be like, oh, I'm losing muscle. And I'm like, well, you're losing lean mass. Are you losing skeletal muscle? Different thing, right? So it's so tricky. People don't understand all these things, It's really, it actually really is technical, which I guess is good. It gives me job security.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. I also think it's important to point out too is going what you said about like a 1% body fat per week, or 1 pound, I should say, in comparison to your body weight or whatever. I think it's also important to realize too is like when you are like doing a check-in or you're weighing yourself or measuring yourself, not every week is going to be that perfectly consistent. Yeah, I lost a pound this week, and then in this week, and then this week. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're not making progress, but there's so many factors that can kind of skew that number. Heck, if I didn't go poop, it could skew that number. You know what I mean? And especially like if you are one of those people that maybe don't necessarily need to lose that much body fat, but you need to put on muscle, then maybe, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it also depends on where you are in that journey. Are we trying to put on some muscle here? Are we trying to just lean out because you have the muscle? So, it's a very person by person basis, but I could also say the same thing even for measurements, for example, I don't necessarily celebrate when I lose inches off of my glutes, because I'm already there, right? I want that number to actually go up. Yeah. But I think it's always nice when I lose inches or measurements off my waist, so that's always a good thing. But glutes, not so much. So it doesn't necessarily equate, like your measurements and the weight loss doesn't always equate to progress, although it can. And I think like if you are a transformation client that's like, losing fat and that's like the goal. Obviously, you want
Yeah.
those pounds to drop, but it's not always the case for everyone.
I think that's actually good to go into too. Like, what's the realistic expectations weekly? So I'm glad you brought that up. This is what I tell our clients is there's kind of a level of importance. So we do weight and measurements and pictures on our check-ins, and then the coaches respond back every week with a video response telling you, hey, work on this area, like this is where we're adjusting things, whatever. So it's a really good system we have. But in order of importance, how I tell clients is the first most important thing is the waist measurement, because we try to lose, for females, 1/4 of an inch on the waist and 1/4 of an inch on the hips, and then 1% of your weight per week. That's like, if someone's transforming, that's like the perfect week. But there's a better week than that. And a better week than that would be if your weight stayed the same, your waist went down and your glutes went up, right? For what we do. Yeah. And that it sounds backwards. You're like, no, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. Well, understand this is not Biggest Loser. This is bodybuilding with what I like to think is the most advanced level of programming you can do. And you are trying to recomp your body in a way where you are gaining muscle while losing fat, which if you talk to any real exercise science guy, they'll say, yes, that is possible. A lot of people are like, you can't build muscle when you're in caloric deficit. That's an old way of thinking. You absolutely can. And so if we can lose 1/4 of an inch on the waist, gain 1/4 of an inch on the hips, and then actually keep your weight like neutral, then we had a really good week, you know. And you got to understand, when you have a workout that's so glute volume intensive as ours, because I mean, we could have, depending on the athlete. I mean, if it's a wellness competitor who's super advanced, she might be working out glutes, 4 times a week. Like if she can handle it, it's but even like most bikini girls, it's like 2 to 3 times a week in glutes. Like we're hammering those glutes, all the time. And so when you have that extreme stimulus and you haven't been doing that, and maybe you got good genetics at the same time, and you're growing while shrinking, the measurements can kind of mess with your head. So you got to kind of go off of feel and pictures. So it's going to go waist measurements first, then your weight, then your hips. But before all that is your pictures. That's going to be, and I like pictures on like a monthly basis. I get them every week, but I don't, on a week to week, my eye is really trained, your eye is really trained at this point to see your clients. But unless they're like super lean, you can't see week to week,
right,
like what the big difference was. Like they have to be like stage lean for you to be able to see that. At like 20% to 19%, you don't really see it that much. So I'll look at like a month and I'll be like, okay, how much changed this month in pictures? And then peak week, obviously you can tell, all the time. But yeah, so so you got to be realistic with know what your goal is and know what your coach is trying to do with you. But yeah, the goal would be shrink the waist, get the hips bigger, and keep the weight the same so we know that we're losing fat while gaining muscle at the same time, and maybe lose a little bit of weight in that scenario. But yeah, so some of you are going to have different things, and it's never going to be, like she said, it's never going to be linear. It's never going to be this like perfect chart of exact linear progress.
Right. Sometimes you get little plateaus here and there too, and then all of a sudden you just lose like 3 pounds or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just, no one can explain it. No one knows why. I think especially, is it safe to say that even with females, it's a little bit more inconsistent because of hormone fluctuations, because of menstrual cycles and stuff like that? Is that a fair statement to say?
No, I would say, why it looks that way? It looks that way, and it's kind of like a misconception that a lot of people have, most people have, because when a woman loses, they're losing like 1 pound a week, right? But when a man loses, they're losing like 2 to 3 pounds a week. And so it looks like it's all based on percentages. So if a man's losing 3 pounds, 2 pounds a week, and then 1 week he just loses 1 pound, it still looks like he's losing weight.
Right.
But when a woman loses 1 pound, a half pound a week, the half pound, 1/4 pound a week is the same as the guy losing 1 pound a week in percentage, right? But she'll think she didn't lose anything that week because she lost, 1/3 of what she should lose. But the guy loses 1/3, he loses 1 pound. So it looks like on the chart, when you see it going so linear, like a pound on a guy's like, oh, I didn't do good this week, but I still lost a pound.
Right.
A girl's like, oh, I did good this week, I lost a pound. She says, I didn't do anything at all, I only lost 1/3 of a pound.
Yeah.
Like, no, you still did just as good as if a guy were to lose a pound.
Oh, I was more saying like the inconsistencies, like in fluctuations of like loss lost plateau, or even measurements on the
It just appears that it's that way.
waist and stuff like that because of bloating and whatever.
No, it just appears that way. Yeah, but you will have the bloating weeks too.
Yeah.
That's the things that guys won't have. That is true. That's a factor. But the actual data is like the same from week to week. But yeah, the bloating thing, the time of the month, that's just an unfortunate thing you girls got to deal with. Hope it doesn't come before the Olympia.
Oh yeah, yeah, right.
It's one of those things. So
True.
yeah. Anyway, so where are we at now? We're talking about.
I also wanted to mention too is like even with like the body fat scans, I know some people do that, and there can even be inconsistencies with that. I mean, we use a pretty high tech one; it's pretty reliable, but not everybody has access to the InBody is what we have, right?
We have a StyQ.
StyQ.
InBody's the one you grab the handles at. You used to do that at FitMD.
StyQ. We have, but some people have like these little like scales at home that apparently measures body fat, and some people still do the skin folds and stuff. But and I think things like that can oftentimes get to people's heads because it's not a very reliable form of measurement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So many things can affect that. Just like weight too. You know, just like weight. You drink a glass of water and you're a pound heavier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it can be very deceiving at times and get to people.
Especially the little the cheap ones. I mean, you got to understand the technology difference. Like the Omron is a really common one where you like hold it like this and you two hands and you hold it. You got to understand like that's a $20 piece of equipment that's on Amazon for $20, an Omron body fat scale if you guys want it. But it's like a handheld body fat bioelectrical impedance thing. Right. Like you got to understand there's a huge difference between an Omron and the machine I have in my has its own office that we built for it. That's $10,000. You know, it's like there better be a difference. You know what I mean? Like I paid for the difference. So yeah, it's significantly different than and my machine isn't even nearly as good as a DEXA scan because that's another $50,000 with, lead in the walls for the room and all these things. Like that's a $90,000 like investment to get that thing doing right. So yeah, that better be better than mine too. So like everything has its system. So just take it with a grain of salt. Anything that's like bioelectrical impedance, which is like, it's a technical way of they send a tiny current through you in one hand, and then how long the signal takes to get to the other hand is basically it's a whole thing. But basically like your fat's conductive and anyway, so it's a long thing. But that's how they measure it. I was like, this is going to take too long to explain. So, but anyway, that's how they measure it. And water will throw that off quite a bit too. So the more hydrated you are, the more that's going to get thrown off too. So something that you want to take into account too. Even with hydrostatic weighing has its errors, which is where you dunk you in water. That one has a skew too. So yeah, they all have their own skews. So that's why I like measurements the best. Honestly, measurements are, you're going to have your human error of measurement, but over the course of a month, you're going to have the same human error. You're going to get accurate measurements at least by the month's end.
True.
So that's what I like. So I would say measure everyone. Measure at your waist. You can measure I always say measure at the largest part of your waist because that's where you're going to have the most fluctuation. You're not going to have too much fluctuation at the smallest part of your waist. And then measure at the largest part of your hips. And then do that every week and seeing if you get that, the weekly goal of that 1/4 of an inch. If you're losing, 3/4 of an inch every week, you're probably going too hard. That's one of those things. So I think with this one now, we should talk about how long it'll take someone to build up enough muscle to be in the bikini division, and how long is a typical bikini division physique. So when you look at all these different divisions, you have like bodybuilding division, right? And you'll see a guy who's like jacked and he's at check-ins and he looks awesome. And I'm like, man, how long have you taken to get ready for this show? He'd be like, 12 years. Like I've been lifting since I was a fetus. Like some bodybuilders will be like 7 years. It's a long physique. That takes a long time to get a bodybuilding physique, unless you're just, like Ramy, who like was just a total freak show, right? I think he had a crazy story about his first time. Like it was like 3 years before he like stepped on an Olympia stage or something that's like that. It was something crazy. That was an older story. It was a long time ago. But unless you're a genetic freak, it's going to take you a long time to get that bodybuilding physique. So every division has its time frame of like what's the average time frame. Men's physique back in the day used to be like a 2-year physique. Now it's more of like a 5-year physique. It's because they're pretty much mini bodybuilders now. I mean, the difference of bodybuilders in classic is like pretty nominal now at the pro level. Those guys are about the same size. It's kind of crazy, to be honest. The bodybuilders these days, or the men's physique guys these days are just, the men's physique guys these days look like Frank Zane did when he won the Olympia. Like they're like it's crazy. It's crazy how big they've gotten. So that physique has taken longer to get to there than it used to be. If you look back in 2011 when it first started, the guys, it was probably a 1 to 2 year physique. 1 year if you had decent genetics and you worked really hard, you could be on that stage in a year. Now, yeah, you have good genetics, it might take you 2.5, 3 years minimum, and then 5 years to probably really capture that division and that pro card for most guys. Not every guy, but for most guys. Bikini, luckily you don't have, when it first started in 2009, it was an easier physique to obtain. It was, you can see a good girl, a waitress who looks awesome at a restaurant and be like, hey, do you work out? She'd be like, no, like, well, why don't you start working out? Let's do a show in 6 weeks. That was a thing. For some reason, people aren't paying attention the last 10 years. And some people still think it's like that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? These girls they look like the figure competitors did, but they're leaner than they were then when figures started off with like the one pieces. If you look back at the figure that had the one piece back in the day, bikini girls now look exactly like they did then, but they have fuller glutes and they're tighter than they were. So they're actually more improved than the figure girls were back then. So the bikini physique now, I mean, for a pro level with someone with good genetics, I would say it's still a 2-year physique, like with good genetics. And that's like really good genetics. Maybe a year and a half if you're like exceptional genetics and with a sports background and we're pretty lean starting off. And then if you're a regular girl, which 90% of people are, you're probably talking a 3-year physique. Maybe even for some people it's a 5-year physique. I've seen that too. People who really try. So it is what it is. It's not going to be fast for most people. But what I will say is that bikini is the great equalizer. Bikini is the equalizer because let's say it takes you 7 years to get to like an Ashley level physique, and it takes you that long to get to that being like, you might look obviously different proportions, all that, but where you're at that pro stage where you have just enough muscle now, well, you still reach the maximum of that. You can't get any more muscle, or else you wouldn't be bikini anymore. So like Ashley, for example, at a certain point, she just can't add any more muscle on, so she has to stop building muscle. So the good thing is you have all that time to catch up now, and it equalizes everyone, because if she gets any more muscle and keeps climbing past that, well then now she's in figure. So that's the cool thing about bikini is it does have its limiting factors where it might take you 7 years where it took Anya a year and a half, 2 years, but it equalizes at some point. It neutralizes, which is really cool. With bodybuilding, it doesn't do that. With men's physique, it has that point too. It just seems like that point is going so fast of growing that it doesn't really have the neutralizing part of it is just doesn't seem to be stopping yet, but eventually it will. I mean, they don't look like full bodybuilders yet. They just look like smaller frame bodybuilders is what they look like. So men's physique is just nuts. So, but bikini, it's staying pretty much there. A little bit of muscle here and there, but it's not like pure craziness,
Right.
So
Totally.
those are some realistic time frames.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to go into like what to expect diet and training wise and how you ought to feel, right? Because I think I've touched onto this subject a few times in our past few podcasts about some people just don't realize what hard work is or what it feels like to diet or all the inconveniences that come along with it. Because our sport, is open to everyone, and you don't have to have an athletic background to start prepping or whatever. So I think there's this kind of a disconnect a little bit about what the training and diet actually entails and how you will feel. Because let me tell you something, you're not going to feel like $1 million every single day. That is not expected, right? You're gonna have rough days, you're gonna get the contest prep cranky sometimes, okay? You're gonna feel tired sometimes. It shouldn't be intolerable. It should be uncomfortable at times, but not intolerable, right? Yeah. But I think a lot of people don't realize what they're feeling, oh, I feel tired or I'm having cravings. That's can be a normal thing, right? It's not necessarily a sign that things are going bad. It's just more so you're not used to this and you need to kind of let your body accept the fact that we're trading more and more, right, than what you're used to. So you might be sore, you might be tired. It's part of the process.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. Okay, let's go into this. So let's say, and I think that you're right on that too, and we really do need to talk about that because people, I get this email a lot too, where people will say, I want to do a show I want to prep for 16 weeks. I want to prep for 16 weeks. Everyone, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, prep for 16. Like when you're prepping, like it's not 16 weeks. It's how we said it takes 2 years. That's what prepping is. It's 2 years to like get you a pro card. There's not focus for 16 weeks, eat like crap, don't work out as hard for 8 months, and then prep for 16 weeks and do a show. That's not what's going to get you to the level that you want to be at. Like you're going to look a little bit better maybe the next year if you do that, but it's going to be like a microscopic amount. If you're trying to get the pro card and you're trying to really go for it, it's 2 years of diligence. Like you're doing it every single day for 2 years to get that pro card. And if you're thinking in these like cycles of 16 weeks only, that's just you getting lean for 16 weeks. You should be thinking, what can I do to add that 10 grams of lean mass today to the areas that I'm trying to target? How can I be better? How can I be better every single day a little bit? And then that's when you get to that pro level. Now, again, if you're a transformation client, you could do it the other way and just take it kind of easy in the off seasons and macro diet and whatever. Just understand you're doing it for health and fitness and looking good, but we're talking about someone with the pro mindset. It's like, I want to go pro, which we hear a lot, which, oh yeah, by the way, we got 3 pros this weekend.
Woo, congrats, Team Elite Physique.
Yeah, we got 3 this weekend. That was good.
Woo.
I was like, we had 9 first call outs. I was like, we could get 6. I was like, let's potentially get 6. We had 3 second places, and you only get a pro card if you win first place. And the second place is the worst place to finish at nationals, man. It's so heartbreaking because it's like you'd rather finish 3rd or 4th because you're like, at least you were far enough away where it wasn't even like it wasn't going to happen. But when you're second, it's like it's just
so close.
It should be better than 3rd, right? But it's like the phone calls after a second place. You're like, you just feel so bad for them. Aww. I feel so bad for them, but we're so close, guys. We're almost there. Yeah, it's just like it almost feels like the second place phone call, even though it's good. It feels like the last call out phone call. It feels the same because there's just such a punch to the stomach, man. You got to be so tough in this sport. You got to be so tough, because it could have been like a point away, like 1 point away.
It could make you hungrier, though.
Yeah, that's usually the second place usually makes people hungrier. I'll say a last call out can sometimes defeat some people.
Yeah, that sometimes can be a little hard mentally.
Yeah, it's a tough sport, man. It's a tough sport. So, but I got off track. Yeah, so we're talking about people who want to be pro, and it's gonna take you some serious due diligence. If you're in that off season, you want a weekly cheat meal, and you're trying to go pro, like that should be fine. Having a weekly cheat meal, but the rest of the days and maybe twice a week cheat meal, some type of limited calories, it's gonna have to be pretty. You're gonna have to be pretty diligent. Yeah. It's hard. It's not supposed to be easy. So. I think that we need to separate those two and say, okay, what do I really want out of this? Am I doing what it's going to take? Do I have enough time to do it? And am I being realistic about it? And that's why I say when people write me the email, they're like, when I want to go pro, when should I start my prep? And I'm like, right now. There's never a time other than right now that question will get answered. I will always answer it right now because the difference is it's not a 16-week process. It's a 2-year process, a year process, whatever. And you're never going to have a time of no inconvenience within that long of a period. So if you're at 1 year, 2 years for you to get like the body, the physique that you want, of course you're going to have to go through a couple Christmases, a couple Thanksgivings, friends' birthdays, weddings, whatever. There's always going to be a reason that you could go off of this, but it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work where you could just find 16 perfect weeks where you could be exactly on your meal plan where there's no inconveniences within and then all of a sudden you're a pro. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to be over a year, 2 years, whatever. So just think, okay, I just have to find a way to work this into my life and be realistic about this. Even if you're on vacation, you're just like, I won't stick to my meal plan 100%, but I'll eyeball and be close and still work out and not go, so far south. Like I'm not saying you have to be a robot. I'm just saying it has to be calculated, everything, all the time. So
Yeah.
to at least some degree, you know?
Yeah, I find that a lot of people, I guess the saying goes, want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be a pro. They want to compete as soon as possible, but at the same time, they also want to go on vacation and enjoy themselves and eat whatever, or they also want an easier plan, you know?
Yeah.
So it kind of, in a way, contradicts what they say. And I think we're big on, hey, there's a difference between walking the walk and talking the talk and walking, talk, and talk.
Yeah.
Talk and talk, walk, walk, talk, walk, walk.
I would love to look like Brandon Hendrickson right now, but
And
I'm
just
not
do
willing.
what you're doing now, yeah.
I'm not willing to put in the work Brandon Hendrickson's willing to put in. That guy works so hard, you know? Like it's just the reality of things. Yeah, I would love to look like that right now, but I'm not. He's eating at a Tupperware, 12 months out of the year and working like a beast in the gym every day. And he would put me to shame in the gym if I went through a workout with him. And I work out pretty hard. It's a different level, you know. I'm not willing to do that right now, and it's okay. But I'm not saying I want to look like that. Like I'm not saying my goal is with my workouts and my eating right now is to look like that, you know.
Right.
So I want to be as fit as I can be, look good, but I'm past that stage of competing now. So like you got to be realistic with that. But problem is people take my attitude, and sometimes I'm more dedicated than people that want to look like Ashley. They'll be like, I want to look like Ashley, and I'm like, I'm more dedicated than you are. I'm like, and I work out harder than you do. What do you think's gonna happen? You know?
Wouldn't it be an awesome world where we just kind of put in minimal effort and got great results? What? How awesome would that be? I wish.
Yeah, I was at the gym the other day, and there was this girl, she was taking like 5-minute rest periods, like every set, 2 minutes, 3-minute rest periods, taking a selfie, uploading on Instagram, this and that. And I'm like, you say you want this, but you don't work out like you want this. Like, you would last 20 minutes in a gym with me if I trained you. And you should be able to last at least like 45, 50 minutes with me in the gym before I smoked you. And I'm like, you don't even see that aren't acting the way you want to act to get the results you talk about getting. You don't even see it. Like you're so far behind. I'm like, you think Ashley's taking selfies every set in the gym and like doing anything other than focusing in the gym? Like I see these girls work out and everyone thinks because they're like dainty girls and they're girly girls and they're fun on social media that they're not absolute animals in the gym. I got some news for you guys. Like you watch some of these girls work out and you're like, oh shit, they're actually like full on bodybuilders. They just do different things. Like, yeah, they don't mess around, man. I mean, I think there's a huge disconnect on that too.
Yeah, because some people just need a reality check with that, and even not even just gym, the whole aspect of it. Like I'm not going out on weekends, believe it or not. It's crazy, right? Yeah. I'm not going out on weekends. It's so hard to believe. Wow. But a lot of people think that like they can do that and get away with that and still get good results. Yeah. Like they want all the shine and all the fun that comes with being a bikini competitor, right? But they don't want to kind of put in that hard work. They don't want to kind of push it any harder or further. You know, you can't just get by doing like, oh yeah, I'm just bare minimum and I'll go out on the weekends. Oh well, but I still want to be a pro bikini competitor, but I'm just gonna, give 50% effort. It doesn't work like that. It really does not. Yeah. You know, I think like maybe it is like kind of our modern day, everything's so convenient to us that people expect things to be a lot easier for them than what it actually is. But when they have to physically put in the work, it's like, whoa, you know?
It's just like any pro sport. It's not it. And that's actually, I would say bodybuilding is probably, well, in terms of food, bodybuilding is the hardest pro sport, for sure. There's no sport that's even close to it. Like wrestling even, it would be probably second, and fighting would probably be second. But nothing's harder than bodybuilding in terms of the food because every meal counts for a bodybuilder. In terms of workouts and intensity, like it's pretty up there though. Fighting's harder, boxing, like things like that. There's more intensive workouts, but it's the problem with the bodybuilding workout is it's such a learned workout. It's such a mind muscle connection and body type of thing. So, but in terms of like lifestyle, probably the most boring lives would be bodybuilders because they have to sleep right, they have to eat right, they can't go out and pop bottles on the weekends because it actually affects their calorie intake, and it's definitely harder. And when you talk to these like top Olympian girls, like for the most part, like especially when they're in season, like they live pretty boring lives, and there's going to be some sacrifice there.
True.
They're going to be tired when they're in season like 8 weeks after the Olympia, and they're not going to want to even go out and do things. So it's like they're, you know, it's just a different level, and I think that a lot of us shedding light on it's important. That it's not all the glam you see on Instagram and whatever, right? It's not just photo shoots and whatnot. It's sacrifice and hard work and a lot of dedication to get to that upper tier. And that starts, you know, now you getting your pro card if that's what you want. You know, you're going to get there a lot faster. You put the sacrifice in now. So I think that that's really good to see too, because those girls, they work out hard. Some of them are like crazy intense.
Yeah.
You know, I like it, you know, when they come in and like, I'm like, I can take them through a workout and I know they can make it through it, because so many times I'll have someone who says they're working out hard and then I'll see them and I'm like, and I know you're working out harder when you're in front of me, because, you know, that just comes with the pressure of like being in front of a coach. You just naturally happens. People like will get nervous when they pose. It's just naturally part of it. You work out harder. Like I would always want to impress my coach and work out way harder when they're watching me and on any sport that I play. So it's like, it's just one of those things. And I'm like, if you're doing that in front of me, what do you do when you're not in front of me? Because when you're doing it in front of me, it's still not hard enough, you know? And so I think that is a huge factor in the success, is how hard you're working out. So what I say is leave the selfies alone, like focus your rest periods for a bikini competitor. Like on a leg day, like should be like 90 seconds max. And on other days, it's like 45 seconds to 60 seconds. You're right back into the set. You're not talking to friends. You're not taking pictures. You're doing your damn thing, you know? Like even like guys like Lee Priest, who's like, don't even bring the phone to the gym. Like leave it in the locker room, you know, leave it in your locker. Like that's hard for people to do these days.
Right.
But the reality is like the focus, it needs to be intense like that. It needs to be like any sport, you know, like when NASCAR guys are driving around the track, they're not looking at their phone. They're focused on their sport. And why aren't we focused on our exercises, right? So it's just it's a different way of thinking, I think, when you take it to that level. And I think this is a good podcast for that, because people need to take some self-reflection and say, okay, I say I want these things, but do I want these things? Like, do I really, am I acting like I want these things?
Right.
You know, it's like that guy who's like, I want to be rich, I want to be a millionaire, whatever. And then what does he do on the weekends? Like, he just goes and pops bottles and plays games and whatever, right? Like, he's not working like the guys who become rich, like Elon Musk, who works the 80-hour work week, right? Which is insane, but look at him, you know?
Right.
You can't say you want that if you're not willing to do that, you know? You can't say you want to have 29 pro, what are we at? 28 pro wins. 28 pro wins if you're not willing to do that, you know? And I'll get a lot of people like, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. And I'm like, no, you could do that. You could do that. Ashley is only special because she does special things, not because of anything she was born special. Like, no one is born special. You're just, some people overproduce and they look special, you know? That's the thing about, I think Mike Tyson had a saying about that. He was like, there's no such thing as talent. He's like, every talent is earned. He's like, so it's kind of a cool saying. He's like, but we see that as so other. We see Ashley doing 28 pro wins. It's so other. She's such a genetic freak. She's so special. No, Ashley works harder than you, and she looks special, right? It's a cool way of thinking about things. And it's like, I think that if you think of things that way, then anyone can be special if you're willing to put special effort out. You know, put an extraordinary workout, you get extraordinary results, and then you look extraordinary, right? And so I love that saying about Mike Tyson. He says, no such thing as talent. And I was like, he's saying that from like the most talented boxer like ever lived, right? He's like, no, it's earned. Everything is earned. And so it's kind of cool. His whole thing is really, I'm a huge Mike Tyson. He's my second favorite person he's my second favorite person in the world, Mike Tyson. Yeah, it's just his mentality.
See the one with the grill?
He has a silver.
Oh, no, that's George Foreman.
He had a silver too. I don't think he does anymore.
No, grill, like the food grill.
That's George Foreman. I think he had the grill like the tooth.
Yeah,
he had a silver tooth at one point. I don't think he's sure he's got
that grill. Okay.
He's got like a awesome podcast. He's got a really. If you guys haven't seen his podcast,
I saw it. I saw some of it. Anyway.
It's called Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson.
Oh, I saw the one with Joe Rogan. I thought you talked about that one.
Oh yeah.
Did he do one with Joe Rogan?
Yeah. He's ultra famous. He owns marijuana farms now and all this stuff, which is funny because he was like fined in boxing for smoking marijuana. Now he owns them legally. He's like, this is a whole funny story. But his is a really good podcast to listen to. It goes into a lot of the mindset things of like being a top athlete. And a lot of the stuff I like talk about is I listen to him and Jordan Peterson and these guys that are like they're really into the mindset of things. I'm trying to get better at that. But he's one is like, he gets me like all the time. Like
Right.
he says some things that really get you, But I like hearing it from him because he's from such a high level, which I think is why people like listening to our podcast from you too, because you're such a high level and you can really talk about the experience of it, and I think that that's something that there's really nowhere else to get that info,
Well, same for you. You're the best at what you do. So
I would
it's good
argue that, but I appreciate it.
it's all subjective.
Yes,
just
it
like
is
for
subjective.
me too, it's subjective.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. Because there's always going to be the argument. But I like to be, as long as I'm in the argument, I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
That's all. All I want to do is be in the argument.
True.
I just want to be in the argument.
Yeah,
So anyway, what else is there?
I think like also just kind of just lightly touching on like whenever it is your first show, kind of expectations for that first show. I think like a lot of people just, some people have that mentality like I'm in it to win it, which is great, but just realize sometimes it does take a few shows to get your footing. Sometimes you don't figure it out right away. And more likely than not, your first show, you're going to make some stupid mistakes, okay?
Yeah.
Really stupid mistakes, okay? And you'll probably look back on it and laugh like I do. But, it's all part of the learning process. And like I mentioned, sometimes it does take a bit to figure out your body. What kind of training do you respond better to? What kind of diet do you respond better to? And posing and hair and makeup and everything else that goes into show day. Not to mention like the nerves and potential stage fright that some people experience. So getting comfortable with the stage itself is a thing, right? That's why sometimes, it does take a while for people to turn pro, even if they do have an awesome physique.
Yeah.
Maybe everything else needs a little bit of work. So I think that's something to also consider, because I know that we do come across as people sometimes that like they've been winners their whole life, like you say.
Yeah.
They've been winners their whole life. They were the popular cheerleader in high school, always the best this, best that. And then when they get into the sport, maybe they don't get first. And then it's kind of like a hit to their ego, right? But it's something to realize that even everyone on the Olympia stage has lost at some point. Heck, some girls have even tied for 16th place in a local show at some point, right? We all start from somewhere, but no one has like a perfect win, just to the top, everything perfect. No. It's not like that in the sport. Everyone has lost at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to mention too, because it's just like any skill, you have to just work on it and work on it and work on it. But the mentality for some reason in this sport seems to not coincide with real life.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just like, no, I right away, that type of thing. And it's just, it's real life. It's just like anything else. So like being, one thing I think, I need to be better about on this podcast too, is like getting more insight from you, from being your experience. I think I need to ask more questions and stuff. And with this episode in particular, like, was there a process for you to get to the stage you're at? Because what you are doing is extraordinary, It really is. We do it, like we just do it, and so I don't think we step back ever from it and being like, dude, what you're doing right now is extraordinary, And that's why I hear all these things, and I always hear people say that. I do hear people say that all the time, and they're like, oh, I could never do that. My body just wouldn't do it. And I'm like, you haven't even tried. Like, how do you know it wouldn't do that? like, how do you think Ashley knows it can do that now? Because she does it all the time. That's how she knows. And so it's like, but even the thought of doing it seems so alien, so crazy to even think about trying to do shows all year, right? Like that to people, because the norm is so set up as, oh, I'll start competing around the Olympia, and then I'll do the Olympia. Maybe I'll do one show after the Olympia, qualify for next year, and do the Olympia only next year, right? That it just seems like that's everyone's mentality. Mm-hmm. How do you get to that stage? Because, as I said, like people think because of that, you're so special and so talented, so gifted. And I'm like, yeah, she may be a lot of that, but it's the hard work that's what does it. It's nothing but that makes her look so crazy.
Right.
So how did you get there? What is it? What's the process of someone like that? Because I think it would be helpful.
Well, I think like a few things go through my mind. Is kind of like one, well, what do I have to lose, right? If I do lose, maybe it's a learning lesson that I need, and I have lost this season. And at the time, it wasn't the best. Like I know I could have done better, but it was a learning lesson. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make that mistake again. So with every show, I am learning. Even if it's something so subtle like, oh, I flipped my hair to the wrong side. I don't know. Anything. I'm always learning. I always pick apart like my photos afterward, my videos, my presentation. What can I do better? And then I'll have a little conversation with you. Like, oh, for next show, I think we can, increase the size of my glutes or whatever needs fixed. Obviously judges' feedback is important with that as well. But, it's kind of like, what do I have to lose? At some point, you got to be like, hey, you know what? This is, at the end of the day, this is fun, okay? And although it is serious, you almost have to convince yourself it's not that serious, okay? We're in this for fun. We're learning. It's a process. It's all part of the journey. And you know what? Who knows how long any of us can do this for, right? You never know. Like I always refer back to when I had to get my eye surgery last year. That was kind of unexpected, and that put me out for a while. And you never know when anything like that can pop up. So, hey, might as well keep competing when you're healthy, you feel good, you're mentally, good. Everything is, in place. I might as well. And I just really enjoy what I do. This is fun for me. I love being on stage. I love the whole process, the experience, the journey, all that. And also, one last thing to mention is the gratitude. I never forget what it feels like, even the first time I stepped on stage and how exciting that was. So it's still super exciting to me because I never forget those little things that made me happy. And they still make me happy, and I still get excited, and I still get super, surprised when I win, right?
Yeah.
So I never get too comfortable with winning to where it's like, oh, just another day, because it's not like that for me. I never expect to win. I never assume I'm going to win. Even after prejudging, even if I'm in first call out in the middle the whole time, I never assume I won the show. I'm still on the edge of my seat, ooh, well, I hope I can pull this off, So I always keep that in the back of my mind.
Well, that's good. It's good insight.
Yeah.
So, and I think that is, honestly, it's a huge part of what we've kind of always talked about, in fitness and business and whatever, that if you do something you love, then you're not really, it's a lot easier to do it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that really was where a lot of this comes from, is you just love it so much, It's crazy to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Speaking of crazy, we can say what crazy thing we're going to do here.
You're so nuts.
In a month.
Is it a month? Is it a month though?
3 weeks.
Okay.
3 weeks or so. Well, by the time this podcast gets out, probably 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks, maybe less, because it's technically on a Friday.
Yeah. So Ashley is going to go for it again. You want to go ahead?
Well, not again, because I've not done it yet.
Ashley's going to do something I don't think has been done.
I've never done this before.
I don't think it's been done.
It might have been done, but
I don't know.
I've never done it.
If it was done, it would be by the old school bodybuilders. Back then they didn't have 2 competitions in a weekend, so I don't think it could have been done. I've never seen a bikini competitor do it. That's for sure. I have seen, where it has been done? I have seen it been done. Only in the circumstance where a girl was an amateur on Friday, got her pro card, and then competed on Sunday.
Same location?
It's the same location.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's the only time. But that's the only time I can think of it. That's it. That's the only time. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was looking what show should I do next? So I'm looking down the list, and I noticed that okay, there's this show in Texas on August 13th. But I was like, oh, but then again, there's Tahoe the same weekend, and I want to do Tahoe. I did it last year, and I had a lot of fun. I was like, but I want to do Tahoe. And then I noticed that's on August 15th, and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. So one is on a Friday, one is on a Sunday, a Friday night, and a Sunday morning. And I'm like, maybe I could just do them both. Maybe I'll just go for it, just do them both. So yeah, why not? YOLO. I'm going to compete in Texas on August 13th, which is at night. I think it starts at 7 p.m. on Friday. And then early in the morning, we're flying to Tahoe the next morning and basically going to then compete on Sunday morning and Sunday night for finals. So
yeah.
That's kind of crazy. I mean, it's not
the
same location. It's a different state. It's just I guess.
No one's done that.
I like the challenge. I'm silly like that. I like these silly challenges for myself. Even the whole Europe trip. That's a challenge for me. Ooh, challenge. Prepping in Europe in a place I don't know. Let's try it. 2 weeks, 2 shows. Let's do it.
It's 2 weeks, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 2 weeks. I'll be there
2
for
weeks,
10 days or 8 days, something like that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing 2 shows in Europe and prepping in an environment that's not familiar to me, with foods that are not familiar to me or as easily accessed. But I'm down for the challenge. Let's do it.
that'll
Let's
be
go.
fun.
Why not?
I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna go to Puerto Rico for a week, probably after your show. I'm gonna be like, I haven't taken a vacation ever, so I'm gonna take.
Oh, is that where you're going?
Yeah, I tell you that. I tell you.
You didn't tell me what it was for.
Yeah, after. I think after. So.
Dang, we
but
should
I'll-
have just done the Puerto Rico and then
right.
make a show out of it. I don't know.
So, and I need tips from guys. If you guys know where any of the cool gyms are in Puerto Rico, let me know, because I'm still waiting. People are texting me back and letting me know, but I'm gonna go in August at some point. So
Ooh,
yeah.
okay.
So anyway, that is gonna be really cool. That is gonna be, people are gonna be talking about that one for sure.
I'm just surprised you were down for it. When I presented this idea to Adam, I thought he was going to say, Ashley, that's stupid. Let's not do that. But he was like, let's go for it.
Yeah, I mean,
I like it.
Well, the thing is, you hold well. You don't like, Ashley's peak weeks aren't like, hey, loader, 2 days before the show, a day before the show, and then she peaks on Saturday, and then on Sunday she looks terrible. It's not, the way that she works is, we've kind of, if we can keep repeating what we did 2 of the last 3 times, is we will just slowly increase carbs at like a stable amount throughout the whole week. And then you can hold a lot easier. There's not this huge fluctuation. It's super predictable. And she, basically it's like 2 days a little heavier, 2 days a little lighter, but it's loaded throughout the week. And then you kind of maintain it for a few days. It's not this huge rebound. So it makes sense in your scenario. And that's why I like peak weeks to be loaded like that. I always put people's carbs like earlier in the week. And on Friday, it doesn't even matter really. Like the Friday, we just kind of make sure everything's good. It's not really like this big thing. So, in that scenario, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So,
Crazy.
yeah,
Man.
it'll be
Crazy.
it'll be a fun one. And I want to be there. Hopefully I could be there. I'm hoping that, because I don't know when you're gonna get to break the all-time record. I hope I'm there that day. I'm at most of them, so I'm hoping that if it happens. So I'm gonna do my best to get to every one, especially before that, if and when you do it, because 29 is gonna be really special, but 30 is gonna be like, dang, someone did it. Can you imagine that? It would be like, someone did it in bodybuilding. No one could do it. Arnold didn't do it. Dexter didn't do it. No one did it. Like someone, who knows? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But I think the momentum would say eventually you'll do it. The timing's there. So I want to be there. We'll see.
Well, I want you to be there too.
I hope. It's just, you just never know when it's going to be. It could be 20 shows from now. We don't know.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Anyway, realistic expectations.
Yes.
Perfect way to end the episode.
Exactly. We're keeping it realistic up in here.
Perfect realistic
See?
expectations.
Keeping it realistic.
So anyway, with that, guys, we're going to leave you. Let us know if you have any questions or anything like that. Tell me where the good gyms are in Puerto Rico, and tell us if you're going to be at the Tahoe or the Texas show to see this crazy chicken competing on the weekend, 2 in 1 week. We'll see you guys next time.